Welcome back to the Behavior Code. I'm Maria.
And I'm Gabriel. And Maria, I want to start today with a question for you and for everyone listening.
Oh, okay, hit me.
Have you ever, maybe after a party or a meeting at work, replayed a conversation over and over in your head, just agonizing over what you said?
Every single time. Yes, 100%. You're lying awake at 2 a.m. thinking, why did I tell that story? Did they think I was weird?
Exactly. Or that feeling when you're about to post something online and your thumb just hovers over the share button while you think, what will people think of this?
It's like this constant low-level anxiety about judgment. It's exhausting.
It is, and if any of that sounds familiar, then you are in the right place, because today's episode is titled, Why You Care Too Much About What People Think, and How to Stop.
Yes, we are going to dive into the deep psychology behind why we are all so wired for approval. We'll uncover the hidden triggers that make you overthink, and most importantly, we're going to give you practical, actionable strategies to break free.
By the end of this episode, you'll not only understand why you care, but you'll have a roadmap to regaining control of your life. So stick around.
Okay, so let's just get right into it. Why? Why are we like this? Why do the opinions of sometimes total strangers feel like they have so much power over us?
Well, the first thing to understand is that this isn't a personal failing. It's not a weakness. It is, at its core, a survival mechanism.
A survival mechanism. That sounds dramatic.
It is. I mean, think about our ancestors, thousands of years ago. We lived in small, tightly knit tribes. Your survival depended literally on being accepted by the group. If you were cast out, you were on your own against predators, the elements. It was a death sentence.
Right, okay, so being liked wasn't just nice, it was necessary. You needed people to share food with, to protect you.
Precisely. So our brains evolved this incredibly sensitive alarm system that's constantly scanning the social environment. It's asking, am I fitting in? Do they like me? Am I safe? That deep, gut-wrenching feeling of being judged or rejected, that's the ancient alarm bell ringing.
So my brain basically thinks a weird look from a coworker is the same as being kicked out of the tribe and left for the saber-toothed tigers.
On some primal level, yes. The threat has changed, but the wiring hasn't. It's all tied to this fundamental human need for belonging. We are social creatures. Connection is as essential to our psychological well-being as food and water are to our physical well-being.
That makes so much sense. It kind of takes the shame out of it, you know? It's not that I'm just insecure, it's that my brain is trying to keep me safe.
That's the first step, to acknowledge it's a normal, built-in feature. The problem is that in the modern world, this feature is, let's say, overstimulated. The tribe is now potentially billions of people online, and the feedback is constant.
And it's not just big things, it's the little hesitations, right? Like you're in a big meeting and you have a question, but you don't ask it because you're worried you'll sound stupid. That's the ancient brain at work. And it's not just about avoiding the pain of rejection. Our brains are also wired to seek the pleasure of acceptance. When we get positive social feedback, a compliment, a knowing smile, like online, our brain releases dopamine, the same chemical associated with rewards like food and money. We're literally wired to be approval-seeking machines. Okay, so let's get into those overstimulators. We know it's ancient wiring, but what are the modern psychological triggers that are just pouring gasoline on this fire? It's about the action, not the identity. Helpful feedback says you did a thing that could be improved, while destructive criticism says you are a thing that is bad. And every time you say yes to something you don't want to do, you're essentially saying no to yourself, to your own needs, your own time, your own priorities. You're prioritizing their opinion of you over your own well-being. It also explains why it feels so personal. It's not just an opinion, it feels like a threat to our very existence in the tribe. It's wild that a simple thumbs down emoji can trigger a primal fear.
The biggest one, without a doubt, is the fear of rejection. We just talked about its evolutionary roots, but it's important to understand that our brains process social pain in the exact same regions that they process physical pain. Absolutely. From an evolutionary standpoint, it was much more important to remember the one berry that was poisonous than the 10 that were delicious. That's the negativity bias at work. It keeps us safe, but in a social context, it makes us hypersensitive to criticism. And it's not just about safety and numbers. Our brains also release opioids, the body's natural painkillers and mood boosters, when we experience positive social interactions. Belonging literally feels good on a chemical level.
Wait, for real? So that feeling of being left out actually hurts?
When in reality, most people are so wrapped up in their own spotlight, worrying about their own hair, their own problems, their own destination, that they probably didn't even notice. Or if they did, they forgot about it 2 seconds later.
So we're essentially junkies for approval, chasing that next feel-good hit of acceptance. That's a sobering thought.
Literally. Studies have shown that taking a Tylenol can actually reduce the feelings of social rejection. That's how linked they are. So when you're afraid of someone's opinion, you're not just being dramatic. You are literally subconsciously trying to avoid real, genuine pain. Second, consider the intent. Is the feedback intended to help you grow, or is it intended to hurt you? Constructive feedback is specific and focuses on behavior you can change. It's about the what, not the who. For example, this report could be stronger if you included more data is helpful. You're just not a good writer is not, because saying no feels like you are directly inviting disapproval. You're worried the other person will be disappointed or angry or think you're not a team player. So you say yes to things you don't have the time or energy for, all to avoid that potential negative judgment.
Wow, that's a game changer to think about it that way. Okay, so fear of pain is number one. What's next?
The second major trigger is comparison and social ranking. It's not just about being in the tribe, it's also about our position within the tribe. We are constantly, often unconsciously, sizing ourselves up against others. Another huge one is our brain's inherent negativity bias. We are psychologically wired to pay attention to and give more weight to negative experiences over positive ones.
The classic keeping up with the Joneses.
Precisely. And the third filter is consider the relevance. Does this feedback align with your own goals and values? If someone criticizes you for being too loud and passionate, but you value expressing yourself with energy, you might decide that feedback isn't relevant to you. You can listen, you can consider it, but you don't have to accept it as truth. Well, if your self-worth is dependent on external validation, then people can control your behavior by giving or withholding that validation. It's the classic dynamic in toxic relationships or high-pressure work environments.
So you mean if 10 people compliment my presentation but one person yawns, I'll fixate on the yawn.
Exactly. But it's on steroids now because the Joneses aren't just your neighbors anymore. They are every single person on your social media feed, presenting a perfectly curated highlight reel version of their life.
You're not comparing your real life to their real life. You're comparing your behind-the-scenes footage to their movie trailer.
That's the perfect analogy. And this brings us to the third and maybe most powerful modern trigger, the influence of social media and its instant feedback mechanism.
The likes, the comments, the shares.
Every like, every positive comment delivers a little hit of dopamine to your brain. It's a reward. It feels good. Your brain learns very quickly, posting this gets me a reward. People approve.
So you become addicted to the validation, and then you start to tailor what you share, not based on what's authentic, but based on what you think will get the most likes.
You've got it. It outsources our sense of self-worth to an algorithm and the whims of an online audience. Our ancient need for approval is being hijacked by a system designed to keep us scrolling. It's a really potent combination.
Okay, this is huge. So we're wired for survival, which means we fear rejection. We're wired to compare ourselves to others, and now we have a machine in our pocket that lets us compare ourselves to everyone all the time and gives us a drug-like reward when they approve. You know, when we talk about social media, it's not just that we're comparing ourselves to others, it's that we start performing for the algorithm.
That's the landscape we're operating in. It's no wonder so many of us feel like we're overvaluing other people's opinion.
So that brings up a really good question. How do you know? I mean, we all care to some extent, right? How do you know when you've crossed the line from like normal social awareness into the territory of actually overvaluing their opinions? What are the signs?
That's a fantastic question because the dose makes the poison, right? The first and most common sign is chronic overthinking, especially around small decisions.
Oh, tell me more. You mean like what to eat for lunch?
Could be, but more like spending an hour crafting the perfect two-sentence email to your boss, or agonizing over what to wear to a friend's barbecue. The key isn't that you're thinking about it, but why you're thinking about it. Are you trying to decide what you genuinely like, or are you trying to predict and control what others will think?
Right, that what will they think filter is constantly running in the background for every decision. That is definitely familiar.
A second sign, and it's closely related, is seeking constant validation. Before you make a choice, you need to poll 5 of your friends. After you do something, you immediately ask, was that okay? Did I do a good job? Was that weird?
You don't trust your own internal sense of good enough. You need to hear it from someone else to believe it.
Exactly. Your compass for what's right for you is located outside of yourself. And that is an incredibly unstable and exhausting way to live.
Which I think leads perfectly into the third sign I was thinking of, which is feeling totally drained after social interactions, even good ones.
The social hangover.
Yes, you get home from a fun night out with friends and you just collapse. Not because you didn't have fun, but because the whole time you were performing. You were monitoring your every word, managing their impressions, making sure everyone was happy with you.
That's the huge cognitive load. It's like running a complex piece of software in the background of your brain the entire time you're trying to have a conversation. Of course you're going to be drained. Authentic connection is energizing. Performance is depleting.
So, to recap the signs, 1, overthinking small decisions through the lens of others' judgment. 2, constantly needing external validation. And 3, feeling completely wiped out by social situations.
If you're nodding along to those, it's a pretty good indicator that you might be giving a little too much weight to what other people think.
Okay, so we know the signs, but what's the real cost? Let's say someone is listening and they're like, yep, that's me. So what? I'm a people pleaser. It's not the worst thing. What are the deeper consequences if we just let this run our lives?
There's a fourth sign we should definitely talk about, and it's a big one: having extreme difficulty saying no. I think the most immediate consequence is a slow, steady erosion of your self-confidence. It's a vicious cycle. The more you rely on others to tell you you're okay, the less you believe it yourself.
So it's not about just taking what people say at face value. It's about being an active, thoughtful receiver of feedback, using these filters to decide what's useful and what's just noise. The I'll like you if you do this for me game. They can guilt trip you, they can praise you just enough to get what they want. You're basically a puppet, and your strings are your own need for approval. Ugh, the disease to please. Why is that so tied into this? You lose trust in your own judgment. You start to feel like you couldn't possibly make a good decision without consulting 5 other people first. Your own inner compass just breaks.
It does, and that lack of confidence leads directly to the second major consequence: inauthentic behavior. You start to shapeshift.
You become a social chameleon. You're funny and loud with this group of friends, quiet and serious with another. You agree with opinions you don't actually hold just to avoid friction.
And over time, you can lose track of who you actually are beneath all those layers of performance. What do you actually think? What do you actually like? The answer gets fuzzy, and that creates a deep sense of emptiness and disconnection from yourself.
That's a terrifying thought, to become a stranger to yourself.
It is. And all of this culminates in what I think is the most tragic consequence of all: a life filled with missed opportunities and regret. And there's another consequence that's a bit darker, which is that it makes you incredibly vulnerable to manipulation.
Because you were too scared to try.
When you have that filtering system in place, you become less afraid of criticism in general, because you have a mechanism to process it without letting it destroy your self-worth. You can extract the valuable parts and discard the rest. It's a really dangerous position to be in because you can be led far away from your own values and goals simply by chasing the approval of someone who doesn't have your best interest at heart.
How so? Tell me more about that.
Yes, you don't apply for the dream job because you're afraid people will think you're not qualified. You don't start a creative project because you're worried people will call it silly. You agree with opinions you don't actually hold just to avoid friction.
And you end up living a smaller life than you were meant to, all because you outsourced the editing of your life story to other people.
There's a great quote, often attributed to the writer Anais Nin, that says, "And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom." Caring too much keeps you in that tight, safe, but ultimately unfulfilling bud.
All right, this is the part everyone's been waiting for. I feel like we have thoroughly diagnosed the problem. We know why we do it, the triggers, the signs, the consequences. Now, how do we fix it? How do we start to break free? And there's a physical cost too, isn't there? This isn't just a mental and emotional burden. It can actually take a toll on your body.
The first and most powerful tool is something from cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's called cognitive reframing.
Okay, sounds a little jargony. Break it down for us.
It's simpler than it sounds. It means actively challenging the automatic negative thoughts that pop into your head. So when you catch yourself thinking, if I say this, everyone will think I'm an idiot, you stop. You don't just accept that thought as truth.
You question it. Like, is that really true? Will everyone think I'm an idiot? Or is that just my fear talking?
Exactly. You become a detective of your own thoughts. Then you actively reframe it with a more balanced, realistic thought. For instance, you could change it to, I have a different perspective. Some people might disagree, and that's okay, but it's valuable to share it. You're not lying to yourself, you're just choosing a more helpful thought to focus on.
I love that. It's not about pretending you're not scared. It's about not letting the fear write the whole story.
The second key is mindfulness and self-awareness. You can't reframe a thought you don't realize you're having. Mindfulness is simply the practice of paying attention.
Right. Just noticing, oh, there's that worry again about being judged. Not getting angry at it, not trying to force it away, just observing it, like watching a cloud pass in the sky.
That simple act of observation is profound because it creates a tiny space between you and the thought. And in that space, you realize you are not your thoughts. You are the one who notices the thoughts. That gives you the power to choose whether to engage with it or not.
Okay, so we're reframing our thoughts, we're noticing them without judgment. What's the third piece?
This is the big one. It's about consciously shifting from a system of external approval to one of internal, personal standard.
Meaning you decide for yourself what matters.
Yes, you sit down and you actually define your own values. What does a successful day look like to you? Does it mean getting 100 likes on a post, or does it mean you were kind, you worked hard on something that matters to you, and you were true to yourself? When your own standards are clear, the opinions of others become less important. They're just data, not a verdict on your worth.
You're playing your own game by your own rules. So even if you fail in the eyes of others, you can still succeed by your own metrics if, say, your goal was simply to be brave and try something new.
That is the ultimate freedom. It's a shift from what will they think of me to what do I think of me?
You know, it's always helpful to look at people who seem to have mastered this. The people who just seem so unbothered. What are the habits of people who don't care too much? This reminds me of a psychological concept that can be really freeing to understand: the spotlight effect.
That's a great way to frame it. I think the first habit is that they are purpose-driven, not approval-driven. Think of a passionate artist, a dedicated scientist, or a determined entrepreneur. Yes, please explain that one. It's so important.
Right. They have a why that's bigger than the noise of other people's opinions.
Exactly. Their focus is on the work, on the mission, on their own curiosity. They don't have time to worry about every little comment because they're so engrossed in what they're doing. They understand that if you're doing anything interesting, some people are not going to get it, and that's okay. They see criticism not as a personal attack, but as a sign that they're actually making an impact.
That's such a powerful mindset shift, seeing disapproval as a filter, not a failure. What's another habit?
They curate their inputs. They are very intentional about who they listen to. They have a small, trusted circle whose opinions they genuinely value, a mentor, a partner, a few close friends.
So it's not that they don't care about any opinions.
No, not at all. That's a misconception. It's not about becoming a heartless rock, it's about being discerning. They value the feedback of people who know them, support them, and have their best interests at heart. But the opinion of a random stranger on the internet, it holds virtually no weight. They have a VIP section for opinions, and most people aren't in it.
I love that, a VIP section for opinions. And I guess a third habit would be having daily rituals that reinforce that inner validation we talked about.
Absolutely critical. It's about how you start your day. People who are grounded in their own self-worth don't typically wake up and immediately start scrolling through social media to see what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, that's like inviting 1,000 opinions into your head before you've even had a chance to connect with yourself.
Instead, their mornings might involve things like journaling, meditation, exercise, or simply stating their intentions for the day. It's any practice that grounds them in their own priorities and values before the world has a chance to tell them what they should care about. It's proactive self-centering.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired, but I also know that just thinking about these things isn't enough. So let's get super practical. What are some actionable exercises our listeners could start doing like today to build these muscles?
Let's do it. The first one is to start a fear journal, specifically using journaling prompts to get these anxieties out of your head and onto paper.
Ooh, I like that. What kind of prompts?
You can start with something like, what action am I avoiding right now because of what people might think? Then dig deeper. Which opinion specifically am I worried about, and why does their opinion hold so much power over me? But my favorite prompt is this. What would I do differently if I knew nobody would judge me?
Whoa, that's a big one. The answer to that question is basically a treasure map to your more authentic self.
It is. The second exercise is gradual exposure, or as I like to call it, building your rejection muscle.
This sounds uncomfortable.
A little, but growth happens at the edge of your comfort zone. The idea is to purposefully take small, low-stakes social risks. For example, wear an outfit that's a little bolder than you normally choose. Voice a mild, respectful disagreement about a movie with a friend. Order a coffee in a slightly weird way.
The goal isn't to be obnoxious, right? It's to prove to yourself that you can survive a little bit of judgment or a weird look. You learn that most of the time, people don't care nearly as much as you think, and even if they do, you'll be okay.
Precisely. The final and maybe most crucial exercise is to actively practice positive self-talk, specifically creating an inner advocate to counter your inner critic.
I think a lot of people's inner critic is loud and has been in charge for a very long time. How do you even start to change that?
You start by treating yourself the way you would treat a good friend who just made a mistake. When you say something awkward, instead of the usual, I'm so stupid, I'm so cringy, you consciously interrupt and say something like, that came out a little weird, but it's okay. I'm human. It happened.
It's self-compassion. It sounds so simple, but it's really hard to do in the moment.
It is. It's a practice. But every time you do it, you are literally rewiring your brain to be a safer, kinder place for you to exist. And when you approve of yourself, you'll find you need the approval of others so much less.
Wow, okay, my brain is buzzing. That was a lot of incredible information. So just to recap for everyone, the big takeaway here is that caring what people think is a normal evolutionary instinct. And it's so important to be intentional about this. A great exercise is to think about how you talk to a friend who is struggling. You'd never say, "You're such an idiot for saying that." You'd say, "Hey, it's okay. We all say silly things sometimes. Don't be so hard on yourself." The practice is to turn that same level of compassion inward. It feels unnatural at first, almost like you're letting yourself off the hook too easily. You know, as we're talking about all this, a thought occurs to me. We've talked about ignoring opinions, but not all criticism is useless, right? Sometimes feedback is how we grow. How do you draw the line between destructive noise and constructive feedback?
But it's gone into overdrive in our modern world. The key to taking back control isn't to stop caring completely, but to care less and to care more about the right thing.
Exactly. Realizing that you occupy a much smaller space in other people's minds than you think is incredibly liberating. It gives you so much more freedom to just be yourself.
That is such a critical point, Maria. Thank you for bringing that up. It's the expert level skill in this whole process. It's not about building a wall so high that nothing gets in. It's about building a door with a very discerning gatekeeper.
Yes, by reframing our thoughts, being mindful of our fears, and focusing on our own personal standards, we can turn down the volume on that external noise. So, who is giving the feedback is the first checkpoint. That makes sense. What's the second? Okay, so how do you become a good gatekeeper? What's the test for what feedback gets in?
And by taking small, consistent actions like journaling, gradual exposure, and positive self talk, we can build that internal foundation of self worth. There are 3 key filters you should run any piece of feedback through. First, consider the source. Does this person know you? Do they care about you? Do they have expertise in the area they're critiquing? Feedback from a random anonymous troll on the internet should be treated very differently than thoughtful criticism from a mentor you respect.
The spotlight effect is our tendency to vastly overestimate how much other people are noticing our occurrence or behavior. You might trip walking down the street and feel like every single person is staring at you and laughing. Absolutely. So for everyone listening, we would love for you to continue this conversation. Head over to our comment section on whatever platform you're on and tell us, which technique will you try first? The journaling, the gradual exposure, the self-talk? We want to know. You know, something that ties all of these strategies together is the concept of self-compassion. It feels like the bedrock of this entire shift.
And if you found this helpful and want more, psychology hacks for a better life, please make sure you subscribe to the Behavior Code wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps us out.
Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Maria.
And I'm Gabriel. We'll see you next time.